So unfortunately, this didn't do so well when it was released in theaters. So you could say Godzilla wasn't king of the box office. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another installment of my MonsterVerse review series, where I'm reviewing the 3 movies leading up to Godzilla vs. Kong. I already reviewed 2014's Godzilla as well as Kong Skull Island, and I'll leave a link to the playlist with those reviews in the description in case you missed either of them, but today we're talking Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Let me know before we begin what your thoughts on Godzilla, King of the Monsters were in the comments below. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But now, let's talk about Godzilla, King of the Monsters. This follows the heroic efforts of the crypto-zoological agency Monarch, as its members face off against a battery of god-sized monsters, including the mighty Godzilla, who collides with Mothra, Rodan, and his ultimate nemesis, the 3-headed King Ghidorah. When these ancient superspecies, thought to be mere myths, rise again, they all vie for supremacy, leaving humanity's very existence hanging in the balance. Just as a reminder, with my other reviews of older films, I will be discussing spoilers for this. If you haven't seen the movie and want to know nothing, go watch the movie first, then come back to this, as this is your spoiler warning. But anyway, here we go. This is directed by Michael Dougherty, who also co-wrote the screenplay, taking over for Gareth Edwards, who was initially set to return, but was still working on Rogue One when this was scheduled for production. And it takes place 5 years after the first film, with the only returning characters being David Strathairn as the Navy Admiral Stenz, as well as Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins as the 2 Monarch scientists we followed extensively in the last film, though themselves in much smaller roles this time around. The main human characters in this film are once again a family who's separated, though here it's in more ways than one, both due to the circumstances with the monsters and also due to the fact that the parents are divorced. We have Kyle Chandler and Vera Farmiga as an ex-husband and wife, with Chandler having formerly worked for Monarch, while Farmiga currently works for Monarch. And both her and their daughter Madison, played by Millie Bobby Brown, get abducted early on by a group of eco-terrorists led by Charles Dance as events kick off. And one of the main criticisms that I had and most people had for the 2014 Godzilla was that most of the human characters in that film weren't all that well written. This kinda attempts to rectify some of that. But to be honest, these characters are actually worse than the ones in the first movie. I know you don't go to a movie called Godzilla, King of the Monsters for the human characters, but with any movie, you do need some sort of emotional core holding the whole thing together, even if only very loosely. And something to keep in mind with this film is that we spend a lot of time with the human characters. I don't know if this was directly in response to the criticism of the first film's bland humans, but either way, they take up about half of the film's 131-minute runtime. And I wouldn't have minded this so much if it wasn't for the fact that most, if not all, these characters aren't just so poorly written. Ken Watanabe, like the first movie, has probably one of the more compelling characters here, but as I said, his role is more limited this time around. So it's not as if every time we cut to the humans, he's always at the center of attention, and he eventually gets killed off at the halfway mark, following Sally Hawkins' character getting killed off early on. And beyond Watanabe, most of these characters serve close to no purpose and are just there. While the film tries giving a personal connection between Kyle Chandler and the monsters as he blames Godzilla for his son's death, the film does absolutely nothing with that. And while he's often seen with the rest of the Monarch crew trying to combat the monsters, most of the time he just screams and yells and gets into arguments with the other scientists, and that's about it. We also get a slew of new characters as various members of the Monarch crew, with some of the more prominent members played by Bradley Whitford, Thomas Middleditch, O'Shea Jackson Jr., Aisha Hines, and Zhang Zi. Some of them will make quips, with Bradley Whitford and O'Shea Jackson Jr. being the 2 most entertaining of the group, but beyond that, these characters are as bland as they can be. And their main purpose is simply to give us exposition, which we get a lot of here. We get an entire history of all the monsters, referred to as Titans. We get what their motivations may be, why they're doing what they're doing, as well as these characters commenting on action that we can clearly see for ourselves. They'll bounce off one another, each providing a little bit of backstory that we need, and then repeat that for 2 hours. And Charles Dance is framed as one of the movie's big villains, but beyond initially abducting Vera Farmiga and Millie Bobby Brown, Brown, he really serves no purpose to the plot, and is actually only sporadically seen throughout the film. Meanwhile, Millie Bobby Brown is meant to be more of the emotional core here, as she does get trapped among the chaos, and the film does try to highlight her relationship with her family, but again, outside of one or two notable things, her actions are mostly inconsequential to the plot, and it goes absolutely nowhere as far as the family element goes. Now, Vera Farmiga gets the most to do of all the human characters, and serves the most purpose. And while her performance was fine, I gotta say, I liked her character least of all. We discover halfway through the movie that she's purposely letting all of the monsters loose, as she feels that humans are destroying a world that once belonged to the monsters, and by setting them loose, it will bring about a balance and natural order once again, as parts of humanity get eliminated by the monsters. This rubbed me the wrong way the first time I saw the movie in theaters, especially as this was only a few months after Avengers Endgame was released, and we just spent a whole year or so talking about Thanos, whose whole deal was bringing about balance and order in the universe through a very chaotic method. And I don't know if this lifted any direct influence from the Marvel movies. I know it was pointed out, but no one really addressed that. And as I said in my review of the 2014 Godzilla, the initial creation of the character was meant as a statement against nuclear war, and this film at least attempts to tap into those themes by doing this, so I respect that. However, having rewatched this recently, try not to let the Marvel comparison cloud my judgment, and trying to judge this on its own merits, it still doesn't work. The way it's presented ultimately comes across as hokey and forced, especially as there never ends up being any takeaway from this, nor does it really come back around to that point in any meaningful way. Farmiga's motivations are stated early on, and she may bring them up again with one or two lines of dialogue here and there, but we gain nothing from those statements. No lesson learned. It's not even as if the lesson was that we don't learn our lesson. The film ultimately does nothing. Other than Farmiga gives us a few obligatory statements portraying her as some sort of agent of chaos before moving on to bog the movie down with more exposition whenever we cut back to the human characters. It felt like the film couldn't fully commit to either having a message or having fleshed out characters, so instead we get one character who gives us some interesting motivations early on that weren't fully fleshed out, only for the film to do nothing with it, and as a result, it comes across as poorly cobbled together. Now, that all being said, I know I ragged on this movie for quite a bit, but I actually don't think it's unwatchable or even bad, despite its faults. While the movie does a number of things wrong, those moments are placed in between a bunch of things done right, which do somewhat save this, though making the finished product very uneven. The one other criticism geared towards 2014's Godzilla was the lack of Godzilla himself, and it didn't seem like Legendary themselves made it a point to make sure that was corrected, as their only mandate was to include Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, along with Monarch again, and that was it. However, Michael Dougherty noted those criticisms and decided to fix that to the extreme, and I mean that in a good way. While he said he appreciated Gareth Edwards' slow burn in the 2014 film, he stated he wanted to go with a gloves-off approach for this. And boy, that's exactly what we get. The absolute best part of this movie, hands down, are the fights between all of these monsters. While half this movie is filled with boring human characters giving exposition, the other half is filled with glorious monster versus monster destruction. And I know there are a lot of Godzilla fans who only wanted to see that and were not disappointed with this one, because we get plenty of Godzilla here, as well as getting a ton of Rodan and King Ghidorah. Mothra we do see as well, but she's seen the least of the main four, as she's in a cocoon for like half the movie after seeing her in the opening. So I'd say if there was one thing as far as the monsters go that may have disappointed fans, it's that there wasn't as much of Mothra here, but when we do see her, it was awesome. And the fights themselves were great. The CGI looked pretty solid for the most part, and while Michael Dougherty's mainly been in the horror realm, with his previous two movies being Trick or Treat and Krampus, he can direct monster action like this pretty well, I gotta say. The color palette would be a little too dark at times, but for the most part, visually, it looked spectacular, as we got to enjoy the massive amount of destruction caused by Godzilla, Rodan, and King Ghidorah all fighting. And because of the amount of action we got here, and because it was done well, I think it makes the movie somewhat watchable, as those moments were a lot of fun. Though I'd say, if you're not a huge Godzilla fan, then this movie only works as something to have on in the background or as a casual watch. When you take the good with the bad, I think the movie's fine overall, but If you follow my channel for a while, you'll know that one thing I come back to quite often is that a film doesn't work if it doesn't have at least either a good story or good characters, or both. And this film, unfortunately, doesn't have either. Now, if this was a film that wasn't taking itself so seriously, then we'd be having a much different conversation. As then I'd say it's just good to sit back, relax, and turn your brain off to. Because I'm good with turning on a mindless action movie that's meant to be fun and lighthearted, even if it's light on plot. But this film is quite serious and gives us a ton of exposition that we frankly couldn't care about. So it's not the film that I'd want to sit down and give my full attention to for a full 2 hours, as the stuff with the humans becomes a chore. However, this would be the sort of film I'd gladly turn on while doing something else and just turn to whenever the monsters were fighting each other, because those moments were a lot of fun. And if you're a diehard Godzilla fan, more than likely, that's all you'll need. I'm very mixed on Godzilla King of the Monsters, because half this movie is full of things done right, and the other half is full of things done wrong. And the things done right are really cool, but the things done wrong are absolutely grating. So it kinda sorta balances out in a way, because while the amount of time we focus on boring human characters drags this movie down considerably, whenever we get to see Godzilla and the monsters wail on each other, it's awesome. And because the things done right do have such a strong presence, it makes this movie a mild positive for me, but only as a casual watch to have on in the background. Godzilla King of the Monsters gets a 6.5 out of 10. So now that I've reviewed all 3 movies in the MonsterVerse, up next will be my review of Godzilla vs. Kong, followed by my ranking of all 4 MonsterVerse movies. But in the meantime, let me know, did you see Godzilla King of the Monsters, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you actually like this one? Do you have a favorite monster from this universe? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.